I want to begin this morning by showing you one of my favourite artworks. It's a dark piece by a Scottish artist, Vittoriano, a man popularly regarded as the world's greatest living painter. And the title of the work is The Weight, W-E-I-G-H-T. Now, as you can see, the subject is a man. The man is dressed for work. And the artist is inviting us to consider that this man's burdens are many, his pleasures are few. Take a good look at him. What do you see? What might you surmise about the life this man lives? He's gotten out of bed, he's dressed, he's ready to face the day, and he's got a lot on his mind. But none of the things that trouble him are going to stop him from getting out of that room and doing what he needs to do, because this is a man who knows why he does what he does. He knows that if he doesn't get out of that room and get on with it, he'll fall behind with his Enbridge bill. The mortgage will go unpaid. His children won't get the opportunities that he wishes for them to have. This is a man driven by the responsibilities of life. And nothing of his own internal pain will stop him from doing what needs to be done. He's not happy, at least not in the sense that that word is trivially understood within our culture. Nor does happiness, whatever that means, even concern him. But this is for certain. In 14 hours' time, he will lay his troubled head down upon his pillow with a sure knowledge that in spite of life's imperfections, he is doing his best. And in that knowledge, he will find contentment. This image speaks powerfully to me, and I know it will to many of you, man and woman alike. My reasons for sharing it will become apparent as we go through this morning's Bible lesson. Now, in Mark chapter 9 and verse 30, we're told that Jesus and the disciples left that place and went to Galilee, where Jesus was teaching them. So far in Mark's story, we've seen that the disciples are very enthusiastically following Jesus, no question. But they are doing so for the wrong reasons. They correctly believe that Jesus is the Messiah of the Jewish faith. But they incorrectly believe that as Messiah, he will save them from the stresses and the strains of a difficult life. So for them, following Jesus means all manner of positive adjectives: empowerment, freedom, peace, prosperity, a life that works. And to their disappointment, and to ours, throughout this story, Jesus has been explaining to them again and again just exactly what it was they signed up for when they signed up for a life of faith. In this particular case, the explanation begins in verse 31 by Jesus saying that the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men. They're going to kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. Now, that ought to have been a very fascinating sentence for the disciples to hear, because the word betrayed here does not mean betrayed by Judas. It doesn't mean betrayed by the Romans or betrayed by an ex-partner or a lover or a business associate or any of those things. The word betrayed is written in the divine passive. In other words, what Mark is saying is Jesus is going to be betrayed by God. God is going to let him down. Jesus is saying to his friends here that in the coming months, they're going to see him suffer. And as they see that suffering, they are to understand that a big chunk of it was God's idea. Now let's just stop and express a collective no thanks to this sentiment. we are all addicted, you and I alike, to what few of us can have and to what even fewer of us can maintain. An easy life. A life in which everything works and in which nothing goes wrong. And so the very idea that some of life's worst experiences are actually an integral part of our human experience is an unwelcome one. It wasn't always this way, of course. The stories and the religions of every civilization and culture from every historical era are stories in which the heroes had to persevere through some kind of adversity, and the adversity was always integral to the story, and it was what made the story good and worthwhile. All the good lives and stories have this in them throughout history. What is the story of Genesis without a serpent? What is the Epic of Gilgamesh without Tiamat? What is the Odyssey without a Cyclops? What is Hansel and Gretel without a witch? What is Star Wars without Darth Vader? What's the NHL without the Canadians? Right? You always need a bad guy who makes things difficult. When I was a kid, we used to read Commando magazines. And the story was always the same every week. There was a hero, and the hero had to get up every day and do difficult things. And those were the men we looked up to as young boys, and our aspiration was to be like that. Our fantasies were of arduous, difficult adventures of the sort imagined by Horatius in Roman stories. What better way for a man to die than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers on the temples of our gods? And throughout history, it's always been that way. Throughout history, we've always understood that difficulties and sufferings and hardships are an integral and valuable part of each and every human story. It's always been that way. Apart from the last 20 years. In the past 20 or so years, we've begun to admire a different sort of hero. Our heroes now are people who can take photos of themselves in an outfit, put it on Instagram, and earn millions of dollars. Those are our new heroes. The people we aspire to be like now can take a screenshot of themselves playing a video game and earn a 7-figure salary. The very notion that there is value in struggle is an anathema to our world today. But that doesn't mean our world today is right. It certainly isn't. For Jesus, particularly, this just will not do. For him, the worst of life is often integral to faith's journey. That is Christianity. And at this point in the story, the disciples, of course, are going 100 miles in the opposite direction, and so are you and I. So when Jesus says what he says in verse 31, we read in verse 32 that they didn't understand what he meant. And they were scared to ask him about it. Now this is ironic for me. This is the second time in just a few days where Jesus has really laid this notion out. Life is hard, and following me involves hardness. It just does. It's difficult to be a person of faith in this world, and you're going to meet bumps along the way. You just are. I'm going to lose, you're going to lose. It's part of the story. He spelled this out to his closest followers, many of whom he has handpicked. These are the best of the Christian bunch, and they didn't get it. They just didn't get it. And I find some comfort in their slowness, because Christian as we are, and we are, I don't know all of your stories, but I know bits of your stories, and the bits I know make me admire you. It is not easy living the life you live and holding on to this idea of faith and of a better tomorrow. I get how hard that is, and I get how you do it. And yet in my admiration for your Christianity and my own, for all our Christianity, we still don't really get Christ. There's still huge bits of his worldview and of his instruction that is just alien to us. It's foreign to almost everything we believe and wish for. And so whenever I see in the gospel the disciples not getting it, being scared and being a little dumb, I'm comforted in my own dumbness. And you should be too. And in this episode, Jesus has to be particularly patient, because apparently the disciples were having an argument. And when Jesus asks them what they were arguing about, Mark tells us that they kept quiet because they'd been arguing about which one of them was the greatest. Now, in first century culture, a person who was great was a person who was successful at religion. This was success in their world, being good at faith. So if you knew your Bible, if you were good at saying your prayers, if you always went to the right meetings and said the right words and were good at sharing with the poor and all that stuff, then you were considered to be a success. And with that success came social prestige. And for this reason, the writings of first century Jewish teachers almost always talk about how important it is to be successful at your religion. Because with that success comes a life of significance and importance. For example, there's a line in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's many lines in the Dead Sea Scrolls that talk about this. And I'm sorry if I realise when I talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm frightfully boring. But I spent a year in my early 20s holed up in a library studying and translating parts of the Dead Sea Scrolls when I wasn't out partying. And so if I had to go through that, you have to suffer every now and again. Is that fair? I spent a year of not having fun for you. You don't seem appreciative. Okay, so there's this particular line in the Dead Sea Scrolls that talks about how it's just really important to know where you are, whether you're at the top or whether you're at the bottom. And this line in the Samuel Scroll says this: you must know where you are, where you fit into the social structure, so that all the children may know their standing in God's community. Who sits at the top table? Who sits at the bottom table? Who gets the best seats? Who gets the worst seats? No one shall move up or down from his rank. Everyone shall know his place. So this is what the disciples are arguing about. Which one of us is the most successful? Who gets to live in the best house? Who gets to drive the best car? Who gets to sit at the top table and be popular? And who gets to sit at the bottom table and be less of those things? Which of us is best? Which of us is the best Christian? Which, given what Jesus has just said about suffering 5 minutes ago, is an odd conversation to be having, is it not? He's just told them in no uncertain terms that suffering is going to be on the menu, and their immediate response is to have a discussion about who gets to be the most important. Now, notice the sentence. Notice that when Jesus asks them what they're talking about, the disciples immediately go quiet. Why do you go quiet? You're embarrassed. They knew they were wrong. They knew this entire conversation that was coming out of their mouths was absolutely inappropriate, but they couldn't help themselves. And neither can you, and neither can I. So many of our fantasies, so many of our daydreams are for things that we know perfectly well will not add an ounce of value or happiness to our lives. We know that. But we can't help ourselves. We wish for what will not make us better. We fantasize about what isn't important. We can't help it. Neither could they. So, next sentence. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 to him and said, in the Gospels, remember, whenever Jesus sits down, It means he's about to say something important. And what he says is that if anyone wants to be first, he must be last. And must be the servant of all. At no point does the way of Jesus diverge more sharply from our culture than when it comes to the notion of what it means to be a person of success. In the culture of the first century, a successful person was a person who was successful at religion. In our culture, a successful person is a person who succeeds at the life we value. That is, one of richness, one of happiness, and one that invariably looks quite good on Instagram. And in this sentence, Jesus completely redefines success. He doesn't do away with the concept, he just redefines it. He says, here's what a successful person looks like. A person becomes successful when they succeed in the things that matter to God. Let me say that again. A person becomes successful when they succeed at the things that matter to God. And it seems that what matters to God is that we give ourselves to others. And no vocation affords better opportunity to do this than that of a servant. So you see what Jesus is saying here? He's saying, all right, guys, you want to talk about success? Let's talk about success. Why not? It's a good conversation. You want to be great? You want to be successful in life? Serve other people. And to understand how radical this concept is, you have to understand that in the ancient world, servant was a word you would have used to describe a person who did stuff that you considered socially demeaning. Think of a job you consider socially demeaning. Think of a job that you would not wish upon your children. This was a word that a parent would have used to threaten a child in the ancient world. You better do your homework. You better stick in at school, because if not, you're going to end up being a servant. Oh no, I don't want to do that. Better stick in school. Plato, for example, said, how can a man be happy when he has to serve others? And Plato was right. It is a ridiculous way to live. But the core of Jesus' teaching is that people should love God and love others. And for Jesus, this is how that love is expressed. You love God and love others by serving. For me at least, one of the most bothersome words in the Christian New Testament is the word humility. The word humility was actually invented by the early church. It didn't exist prior to that. And the early church probably invented the word humility in direct response to this teaching of Jesus. And the construction of the word is fascinating. It's a compound word made up of two Greek words, tapainos, meaning lowly, and phroneo, meaning to think. So the word tapainos would have been a word used in the ancient world to describe a person who, mops floors or flips burgers or waits on tables or something like that. A person who pretty much works for minimum wage and doesn't have a lot left over at the end of the week. The word phroneo meaning to think. So the ancient church brought these two words together, tapaino meaning lowly at the bottom, minimum wage, phroneo meaning to think. And they crammed these two words together to form the word tapaino phroneo, which means think of yourself as though you were a nothing. In a culture obsessed with image, in a culture obsessed with continually pushing out the idea that you have an amazing life that's perfect, think of yourself as though you were nothing. This is the meaning of the New Testament word humility. So here's success redefined by Jesus. If you look around your world, and if you think of yourself as being nothing, so nothing that it's your job to look out for others and to take care of others and to pick up after others, however you interpret that, then you'll be successful. Because then you'll be into the things that matter to God. Even Jesus says, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. And to give my life for others. And even stepping outside of the uncomfortableness of the Bible for a moment, let's give ourselves a respite there. Just think about it sensibly. Is there anything you dislike more than a selfish person? Do you know any selfish people that are nice to be around? I don't. And conversely, is there anything you admire more than a person who's always picking up after others and looking out for others and taking care of others? We stupidly think that we make ourselves happy by trying to be happy. But I think we now know that happiness is an accidental product of living properly. Do you know any happy, selfish people? I don't think I do. And even if you're totally crass about this, and we have that within us, of course, you should see value in unselfishness. Who do you most want to buy from? Who do you most want to be in a relationship with? Who do you most want to do business with? Who do you most want to be around? A person who's all about themselves? Or a person who's all about you? And all about others? Putting others first, it's not only right, it just makes sense. Now, the disciples would have understood nothing of this. All of this is a foreign concept to them. So Jesus illustrates what he means in the next sentence by taking a little child into the middle of the room and saying, think about it like this. Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me doesn't just welcome me, they also welcome the one who sent me. Now, one of the salient features of our culture here is predominantly Italian in this area. 82% of our demographic is Italian. It's good. One of the salient features of this culture is that it celebrates youth. I remember, for example, when my children were younger, I used to take a day off on a Monday, and this was before my kids went to school, and so I used to go take the kids to Zehrs to buy groceries on a Monday. And I think without fail, every single time I took my kids to the store, they both have blonde hair and look very beautiful. How could they not? Almost every Monday, some old Italian grandmother would come up and grab my kids' cheeks or pat their hair or something and make some expression of how beautiful my children were. They didn't say anything about me, but they always said something about the children. This is our culture, right? It celebrates youth. It's a good thing. This is not the culture of the ancient world. In the ancient world, with its high mortality rate and its need for cheap labour, children were completely unimportant. No one cared. I actually read a line in the Mishnah not long ago that spoke about how if a father is hard up for cash, he can farm his children off into slave labour to bring in some extra money. Seems reasonable to me. So as Jesus grabs a child within his first century Jewish culture, he is grabbing something, let's use the thing word, completely unimportant. Something that doesn't matter and has an extremely limited value. And so the point that Jesus is making then is that you should warmly welcome the most useless, the most unimportant, the least valuable. This is what I want you to do. I want you to pick up after. I want you to look out for. I want you to serve. I want you to make yourself about this. most useless, most unvaluable, most unimportant thing. And interestingly, that's not strong enough a word, devastatingly, the text says that how you respond to them, the most useless, is how you respond to Jesus. And how you respond to Jesus is how you respond to God. Now I'm uncomfortable. I wish for faith to be about my own private piety. And I like it. I try to spend time every day in Christian meditation. I pray, I read my Bible. I hope you try those things too. Good things to do. But in sentences like this in the Bible, we are reminded that Christianity is not a thing we do on our knees or on our sofa with a Bible in our laps. It's something we do in the real world. You know what? I don't think Jesus wants us to tell him how much we love him. I think he wants us to tell others how much they are loved. I don't think Jesus wants us to spend hours of our lives praying. I think he wants us to spend hours of our lives having a cup of coffee with someone who's depressed and can't make it through another day. I don't even think Jesus wants us to be at peace with them. I think he wants us to make peace with others and to fix relationships and to mend fences and build bridges or whatever we do with fences and bridges. You get the idea? Jesus shows himself to us in the people we meet every single day. That's Jesus. And as we give of ourselves to those people, as we pick up after them, we give of ourselves to Jesus, and hence to God. Many times in my life, particularly my younger life, I've said something to the effect of Christianity isn't a religion, it's a relationship. Slightly crass statement, but to be honest with you, to be brutally honest, that doesn't mean anything really. Christianity is absolutely a religion, of course it is. And in a very limited sense, is it a relationship? What does that even mean? This modern evangelical notion that we somehow have a relationship with Jesus. What does that mean? The church uses these phrases and never bothers to explain them. How can you have a relationship with Jesus? I can't see Jesus. I don't know what Jesus is. I know he's risen from the dead. I know he's somehow with me. I know somehow I'm in Christ, but I don't know how do you have a relationship with him? But I can see you. I can know you. And I need to treat you well. I need to think well of you. If you hurt me, I need to forgive you. If you wrong me, I need to let it go. If you hate me, I need to love you. If I feel like thinking ill of you, I need to resist that thought, because here is the actual teaching of the Bible. How I treat you and how you treat other people is how you treat Christ. We do not express our relationship to God religiously, and you know what I mean by that. We express it by how we treat other people. Now let's go back to our Jack Vittoriano. So this is you. This is you. You too have a weight. Your burdens are many. Your pleasures few. And so much of your day requires you to push through it. To push your own needs. to push your own feelings, your own aspirations deep down within yourself, so that you can be the helping hand, the listening ear, the present unselfish parent, the forgiving brother, the kind-hearted stranger that your faith demands you be. Christianity doesn't care if you feel like it. It asks so much of you. Push it all deep down and be what the Bible asks you to be. Are you happy? No one cares. But are you doing your best through circumstances that are absolutely imperfect? Then I admire you, and I am proud to know you, and humbled to teach these difficult bits of the Bible to you. You're doing all right. A lot better than you think. Be content with that. Any questions on any of that stuff? I don't know why I ask. I can't see any of you and I'm going blind with that. Let's pray. I ask for God to bless you. I ask for God to keep you safe. I ask for God to give you peace. And I ask for God to make it so that all the roads of your life lead to a good and a pleasing and a pleasant place. I ask this for you and for all those you love and for those for whom you are worried. And I ask it through Christ our Lord. Amen.